Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the audience. A very warm welcome to everyone that is tuning in today for this IPHE Policy Forum on Hydrogen, the New Global Commodity. For those who are not familiar with IPHE, IPHE is the oldest intergovernmental network on hydrogen. It exists since 2003, 20 countries plus the European Commission. And basically, the main G20 countries are members. And we are looking at how to advance policies, regulations, codes, and standards to encourage basically the penetration of hydrogen in the economy. Now, we have a fantastic policy forum today, and you are right to sign up for this one. And I can already immediately start by giving the floor to one of the most important, if not the most important voice in energy policy nowadays, which is Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of IEA. And we can, I think, without exaggeration, say that when the IEA and when Dr. Fatih Birol speaks, the world of energy and increasingly also of climate is listening. So, Fatih, we are very, very pleased, very happy, honored to have you with us today to help us kickstart this great discussion. And I'm happy to give the floor to you and listen to what you kind of wisdom you can share with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Noé, Mr. State Secretary, dear colleagues. Very good morning to all of you. It is a great pleasure and a privilege for me to be here with you today with this IPHE Policy Forum. Noé, you kindly introduced the IPHE. We all know what an important institution it is and what an important role it played throughout the years, even in the more difficult days of hydrogen, when not everybody was so much big fans of hydrogen. IPHE was a very strong supporter and convener of the hydrogen discussions. So it's a great pleasure, ladies and colleagues, for me to be with you today, and especially so because today is, as I understand, the very first day of the tenure of the Mr. Noé van Hulst is the new chair of the IPHE. I know Noé since many years, maybe over 2 decades. We work in different contexts. He has been my boss 3-4 years, from whom I learned a lot. And he was ambassador of the Netherlands to OECD and the IEA, had several important tasks. But of course, we will always remember Noé now as Mr. Hydrogen, which is he pushed the Dutch, European, and global hydrogen agenda very strongly, and I am very happy to see him as the new chair of the IPHE. Noé, please accept my sincere congratulations for this important assignment. Now, what I thought is to perhaps give a bit of a opening remarks, 2 things. The recently various hydrogen we see, and the second, what the IEA is doing, and more important, wants to do on hydrogen. So, I mean, first of all, we all know that hydrogen has been ignored by the energy sector many years, despite its potential important role in addressing environmental challenges, both climate change and air pollution, and enhancing energy security. I should tell you that of course, hydrogen is not the only option, only way reduce emissions. Our latest report, the Energy Technology Perspectives, is a lot of information, but one of them is very telling for me for energy policy and climate policy, which is the following. In order to reach the 2050 net zero target, we have to reduce our emissions big time, and 50% of those emission reductions need to come from technologies which are not ready for the market yet. So we have of course renewables, efficiency, they are ready for the markets and others, but there are some technologies which are not ready for the market, and hydrogen is definitely one of them. I think the main effort today around the world to make the hydrogen mature enough to see a significant share in the global energy picture. Now, wherever I look, I see that almost all the governments around the world have ambitions for clean energy transitions. This is very good news. Of course, those ambitions need to be tested vis-a-vis what they are doing in the real life, but it's a good start to have such ambitions, and most of the countries who have such ambitions put an emphasis on hydrogen in their plans. Now, we believe that the hydrogen, liked by everybody, is a good news, but we have to do a few things. First, we need to see demand for hydrogen to increase. According to our analysis, again, the hydrogen demand, in order to reach our 2050 net zero targets, hydrogen demand needs to increase about 7 times compared to today. And it is going to be, it should be used in many parts of the energy. Today, it is mainly focusing on refinery sector, but we know that there are many opportunities from road transport, a very important part, to shipping, aviation, iron, steel, and power sector. Many opportunities there. And one good thing about the hydrogen is, among other things, being so versatile. It can be produced from many different sources of energy, and it can be used in many different energy consuming sectors. Our numbers show that in a world where we reach net zero in 2050, the share of hydrogen can be between 10 to 15% in total final consumption. The amount of the amount of the hydrogen needs to increase substantially, and it needs to reach about 10 to 15% in the total final energy consumption. And this, of course, needs, among other things, again, creating demand. Now, of course, we hope to see that the hydrogen, whatever we see is low carbon. We can get low carbon hydrogen through use of fossil fuels with CCUS or through use of electrolyzers. And here, there is a big opportunity for many companies to bring the cost of electrolyzers down. I think this is the key issue: bring the cost down, bring the cost of electrolyzers down, as electrolyzers in our calculations make about 60% of the total cost of hydrogen. And this is, many of you know much better than me, this is not a big scientific and more technological miracle. It is just an equipment. By learning by doing, as we have experienced in the solar PV in the last 10 years, through mass manufacturing, we can bring the cost of electrolyzers down. So to sum up, Noé, we are very hopeful. We see many countries, many companies around the world are keen to push hydrogen. We think that in a net zero world, hydrogen can play a very important role, and we need to create demand for hydrogen, and this is not an easy thing to do. And here, we at the IEA wanted to suggest three things as our program of work on hydrogen, which is for me a priority. Number one, we believe the international cooperation on hydrogen is very important. Learning from each other's experience and sharing experiences, understanding each other's concerns. So therefore, the Japanese government is organizing each year a hydrogen energy ministerial meeting, and I am thankful to Japanese government that we agreed the next hydrogen ministerial meeting, the METI, Japan and the IEA will organize together. So this is one area that we want to underline. Second, hydrogen is relatively new. This golden rush in hydrogen is relatively new. So therefore, we have to understand what is happening where. So we have decided that like we do each year, and renewable market review, like with the electricity, oil market review, I asked my colleague, Dr. Gül, to come up with an annual global hydrogen review. This will be, in my view, the North Star of the hydrogen industry to understand which investments are being done, which regulations are put in place, and in which countries, just to give the status and take stock of what is happening on the ground and help the decision makers to fine-tune their strategies. And third good news from IEA, after having a joint ministerial meeting with the Japanese government and starting a new annual report on global hydrogen review. And for me, perhaps very, very important news is that we were able to convince Mr. Noé van Hoos, the new chair of the IPHE, to act as an advisor to International Energy Agency on hydrogen matters. I am sure both myself, Dr. Gül, and the others in the IEA will benefit from this a lot. So, in a nutshell, Noé, we think hydrogen is taking off, and as IEA, we are very happy to support this for governments and for companies around the world. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Fatih, for those opening remarks. I think very important always to hear that IEA, of course, looking at all the fuels and all the technologies, puts it in the broader perspective, clean hydrogen and the prospects, the possibilities. Maybe just if I can ask you a couple of questions. Just maybe first, you talk about indeed huge momentum. But if you now, what's your sense? You're talking to so many governments and also companies, and of course we will hear later from the German State Secretary and from also from the oil companies. What's your sense? If you look at all these ambitions, are they doing enough? Is what the governments are doing, putting on the table, and the companies, is that enough compared to what is actually needed to fulfill that potential that you just mentioned? What's your impression?
What I would say, Noé, is that, as you know, we talk with all the governments, all the key governments around the world, but I also talk with many companies, the energy companies, also iron steel companies. One thing is sure, everybody loves hydrogen. Now, perhaps 10 years ago, I read a book called Every Woman Loves a Russian Poet. It was the name of the book. So this is the looking for a Mr. Right. So is hydrogen Mr. Right? Many people think so. It is a very good news for hydrogen industry, but we need to see two things from governments to make it happen. First, a credible strategy. And second, how this strategy will be implemented through finance and through regulations. We want to see them. This can be financial incentives and or mandates in some cases, which is another important element. So for the IEA, we like the targets and the statements of the governments, but we like even more to see what credible policies are put in place to reach those targets. What is the engineering of those reaching those targets? And I can tell you that I am rather lukewarm in many cases here, and there is some type of still a divergence between the targets and the policies put in place.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Fatih. Given the time, because we have very limited time for all of our discussions, I'd like to leave it here for the moment concerning your contribution, Fatih. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time, for being with us and sharing those insights with us. I'd like to move now to His Excellency, the State Secretary, Mr. Andreas Veicht. And we are so happy to have you with us, Mr. Veicht. I was talking to your staff, and they were telling me he is so busy. Everybody wants to have a piece of him nowadays on hydrogen because, of course, number one, you launched this very ambitious German hydrogen strategy this year in the spring, and I can tell you, I think it was a tremendous game changer, certainly in Europe, that you put on the table not only a strategy, but also tremendous, impressive funding, 7 billion in Germany and 2 billion also included there for international cooperation, which is also, I think, quite unique. And plus you now have the EU, you hold the EU presidency, and everybody's looking at your leadership there in Europe on hydrogen as well. So perhaps you can enlighten us on your road forward and how to spend that wisely. Mr. Veicht, please, the floor is yours for a short introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Van Holst, dear Fatih Birol. Good to see you again, at least virtually, but very worthwhile, and I'm very grateful having me in this conference. Well, first of all, let me say that I'm with Fatih. Hydrogen is very important. Everybody loves hydrogen. It's true. But it's not a silver bullet. It's and when it comes to the energy transition or to the whole transformation of the economy, we have different pillars, and every pillar is important. It's the phase out of fossil, as it is expansion of renewables, at least for Germany, as we have no other options like nuclear anymore in our energy mix. It is energy efficiency, which is very important from my point of view, digitalization, and of course hydrogen, as we can't electrify every sector and any use case. So we need molecules, and those molecules should be greenhouse gas neutral. So what we have is a great economic potential of hydrogen. So it's not only a question of the climate policy, it's also a question of industry policy, of recovery after the pandemic. So that's why I think everybody is quite excited about hydrogen, and so are we. And these global markets offer immense opportunities for companies and potential for sustainable jobs in all our countries, and especially for those countries who are able to deliver technology and also demand, of course, on the demand side. That's where Germany comes into place, and also Europe. But of course, also for those countries who are able to produce at least the renewable electricity at the cheapest possible way. So this is a chance for those countries who have those important circumstances and resources. This is Northern Europe. This is also southern part of Europe. This is Africa. This is Arabia. So a lot of opportunities which are coming out of the natural resources those countries have. We, as you mentioned already, we launched our hydrogen strategy by June this year in Germany. And we have two parts of goals and objectives. One is to establish a domestic market on the demand side, but especially also on the supply side. And why did we so? Germany is a highly crowded country. We have to do a lot to produce in renewable energies in Germany to feed the electricity demand. We do it because of our industry policy. So we see what Fatih also mentioned today, but also previously. We have to bring the cost down of the capacities of the installments and electrolyzers, and that's why we want to create in the first place a domestic market, and to help, let's say, achieving those scale effects. That means 5 gigawatt of electrolyzers until 2030 in Germany, and another 5 gigawatts until 2035, 2040 at the latest. But hydrogen can only be established if there is a pull effect, if the demand market will react. So the demand is crucial. It must come from the demand. This is the main the difference to the electricity energy when the energy transition we established and we started 20 years ago, where it's more or less a push effect, where we push the renewables into the merit order. Now on the hydrogen side we have a pull effect. And we see demand in Germany around 100 terawatt hours in 2030, quite a big demand market. And because of the fact that green hydrogen, for our view, is the only really sustainable solution in the long term, but is rather rare and expensive in the first place, of course, other options like blue or turquoise hydrogen will play a role in the European market and the German market. So it's not only an exclusion of other technologies, but any hydrogen has to be greenhouse gas neutral. So Germany will always remain an energy importer, and that's why we have also an international position and a national approach to our hydrogen strategy. And that's also the dimension on the global level, but also European level. We need certification, guarantees, and origin. So those companies, sectors, consumers who are demanding hydrogen they must be sure what is into the package, if I may say. So what is this hydrogen about? And that's why certification standards are very important. And we need an infrastructure development for fluid hydrogen markets in Europe. So this infrastructure policy is also a European issue. In our German national plan, we implemented 38 measures along the whole value chain. So we do think in value chains. Okay, supply, sourcing, supply, infrastructure, demand. On the demand side, in the first place, those sectors who are quite near to the economics. Those sectors who are quite away from the economics in the second phase. And this is steel industry, this is chemical, these are refineries and mobility sector. So this is in the first place on the demand side. And I'm totally with Fatih. It's not only about ambitious and goals and objectives. We need an approach, we need a strategy, and with measures. And that's why we implemented 38 measures. And now we have also in Germany established a steering committee for that. So this is on the one hand side a council with private sector, with science, with NGOs, industry, and on the other hand, a state secretary commission, because different ministries and federal government are working on that on a European level, German level, but also on the international level, and that's how we steer it, so that we really bring pace on the street. When I come to our German presidency in the Council of the European Union, hydrogen, of course, is also one priority along offshore wind industry. And our goal is to find a consensus among the member states. So by the end of this year, which is now, the next 3 weeks, we want to achieve council conclusions as a valuable input to the Commission, which is bound to finalize legislative packages in 2021 as delegated acts. So this council conclusions could deliver the basis for those acts of the Commission. And there are key elements for these council conclusions: the framework of state aid, which is quite important because in the first place we have to fund and to give money for capex, but also for opex. Internal market for hydrogen, how is it organized, and the regulatory framework, especially, but not only, but especially also for infrastructure. And of course, there are challenges because different member states have a different approach. For some nuclear, the nuclear option is very important. Others for blue hydrogen, CCS. And others only see the green hydrogen as a real option. So this is something, like always in Europe, we have to compromise on. And we are now finalizing the last details on the council conclusions, and I'm very hopeful that we will find a very good common ground. So, but we see a common ground. So there's that I say importance of electrification and efficiency first as a principle. Priority for industry and mobility. This is a common ground which I see amongst the member states, and also, but the big potential for hydrogen-based decarbonization. And by December 14th, we want to give this council conclusion. So that should it be by now. But just to show you that it's not only, that's what maybe the last sentence from my side. It's not only about ambitions. It's about really strategy and measures. And of course, that's what industry wants to see, because they want to commit investments by now. 2030 is in 10 years. When it comes to this capital-intensive industry, that's tomorrow. So we have to be quick and reliable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. State Secretary, for this very comprehensive overview and also detailed at the same time. If I can ask you perhaps two things. You mentioned already a lot, including what I think very important for industry to hear, that you are thinking indeed about the concrete measures necessary, not only for CAPEX support, but also OPEX support, very critical for industry. But you have this announcement of the 7 + 2 billion. If you would make, maybe it's too hard to answer this question, but the 7 billion, what do you think is going to, where is that going to be spent? Most of that 7 billion, in which areas or which kind of instruments? Would you have any guess on that? Number one. And number two, my second question would be, if you look at the European strategy, and indeed you're preparing council conclusions, and we wish you good luck with that. We know how difficult it is sometimes. But what would be the most important, the most critical thing that this EU strategy or the EU going forward needs to deliver on hydrogen? if you could answer those two questions, please.
Yeah, so when it comes to the money, we really think along the value chain. So I'm roughly, maybe 30% of the money will go to the capacities in order to produce hydrogen. So making scale effect electrolyzers, bringing costs down. Our money, the state taxpayers' money in Germany, will only go to green hydrogen technologies. We won't exclude any other hydrogen coming to Germany, to the demand market, but public funding will go to green hydrogen technologies. So this should be quite big scales. I mentioned the 5 gigawatts until 2030 on electrolyzer. So this is the first package. And it could be done by, let's say, we are now launching on the European level important projects of common European interests, and we will have the launch event in December. So also by the end of this year, to kickstart this program. We did it quite successful in the battery cell fabrication, and now that we want to shift that, to copy that also to the hydrogen economy. Then a smaller share, but even big enough for infrastructure. So the infrastructure side is quite important. We want to shift existing gas infrastructure to a hydrogen pipeline system, and that we need also some investments. But as there are no consumers by now, and nobody who wants to pay the feed tariff by now, those industries need help to invest in their grid. So this is the second part. And the third part is very, very important, and this must come in the first place, or simultaneously, I must say. This is the off-taking side. So steel industry, mobility, all those sectors who need help in order to shift their technology for use cases for hydrogen. And this must be done in simultaneously, not one after the other, but simultaneously, and that's what the money will go to. Your second question, what is Europe has to do? Well, many things, of course, but the most important thing I would say is certification and standards. So sectors who are willing to buy in hydrogen must be sure what is this hydrogen about, and is it really, let's say, greenhouse gas neutral? Are there certification standards they can rely on? So to achieve a mature market, we need standards. That's what is very, let's say, successful in the European markets, that we have in industries those standards. Second, again, a smart infrastructure policy. So if we want to trade hydrogen within Europe, so how can we regulate this infrastructure, let's say, on the gas pipeline market? And thirdly, of course, also state aid rules. This market has to be set up. If it would be done by the market all alone, we wouldn't need any governmental issues. So as governments have to act and have to spend public money, we need a flexible state aid framework for that. So these are and there are different other issues and topics, but I would say these are the three most important from my point of view.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. State Secretary, for sharing these insights with us, and thank you again for your time. The same to Dr. Fatih Birol. Unfortunately, we could probably prolong the discussion much longer, but we have a busy program, so we're moving to the next discussion. But once again, thank you so much for being with us. And Fatih, yes, you wanted to say something? Okay. Okay, thank you so much once again, and good luck the rest of the day. Thanks. So we're moving now, ladies and gentlemen, to our next round of discussions, which is going to be as exciting, I think, as the first one. And we are extremely happy to have with us representatives from very high-level representatives from both oil companies and from an investment fund. But let me start with our first guest. And thank you so much, Ms. Elizabeth Brinton, for being with us. I was looking at your very interesting trajectory. You relatively recently actually joined Shell, and coming from background also in the digital economy, but also in the utilities. You come from the utility side. So maybe you are even more qualified, I would say, than any other people from high-level people from Shell to comment or to discuss this issue of what some people say, hydrogen. Is this going to be kind of the new oil? Are we shifting basically from oil to decarbonized molecules in terms of clean hydrogen? I think there's even a book called "Is Hydrogen the New Oil?" From our good friend Thierry Leperc. So if I start with you, Ms. Brinton, you came into Shell and you're looking at these issues. You're leading those incredibly important efforts. So what could you tell us a bit on how does this world that Fatih Birol was talking about and the State Secretary, how does it look like from your perspective, from an oil company that how much has changed in terms of the momentum for hydrogen, and how are you engaged in that? What are you doing yourself to get into the game?
Yes,
Please.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And really building on the conversations that have been mentioned before, it's really a systems transformation, and Royal Dutch Shell as a whole is really focused on being an integrated energy company. And so it is that transition of who we are fundamentally as a company, which is part of the reason I'm here. And as you've correctly stated, I have zero oil and gas background. I've been green for the 20 plus years of my career. So working in net zero before it was a thing, actually. And so really as picking up on the earlier conversation, hydrogen is an essential portion of the overarching energy system transition. And so, for example, in Germany, we're working on the transition of our Rhineland refinery to an integrated energy park. So we're currently building one of the largest PEM electrolyzers actually in the world right now. This is still early days, so it's only 10 megawatts. But what's really important about the PEM electrolyzer technology is that it's stackable. And so what we're able to do, again, in the systems perspective, we're able to bring in intermittent renewable power into that electrolyzer. We're also able to, because of the PEM technology, we're able to use that as an edge of grid solution to help balance the grid. We're able to then help decarbonize our own refining process at the energy park, as well as then provide additional green hydrogen into the local German economy in that energy hub type of concept. And it builds on important principles of being able to reutilize existing gas infrastructure. It builds on being able to bring in more renewables and stabilize the grid. And so one of the things that's important, and I think from a policy perspective, and this is what we're thinking about as Shell from an integrated point of view, is actually systems reform and how the energy system itself transforms. And so correctly stated, renewables alone are not a silver bullet. Hydrogen alone is not a silver bullet. It's the coming together of these different technologies with a solution mindset. And that is, I think, what's going to make the transition not only feasible to do, but also affordable to do. And we need to have that certainty of trajectory. And I'm so grateful for the bold leadership of countries such as Germany, the Netherlands, the European Union as a whole, because as investors, as publicly listed companies, we have to have a certain certainty about our ability to make commercial returns, even on the earlier technology.
And if you listen to, for instance, what the State Secretary mentioned, his kind of approach and his way forward, are you confident that the governments are going to like Germany and others, they're creating this environment in which you can indeed boost your investment in this area?
Yes, exactly. And I'm very, very grateful, again, for the bold leadership of the German government. And as what the Secretary just mentioned, is exactly that. It's creating that incentive for the pull. You have to have the demand side incentivized, because you have to create the sustainable decarbonization. And Germany learned some really important lessons from the Energiewende before, is that you can only push so far. So you have to be able to create a virtuous ecosystem of change where the economics can work, where you get the pull from the customers, and then you're able to actually further your investment. And it's one of the reasons why Shell is actively investing in Germany. So in addition to the electrolyzer on the commercial industrial side that I mentioned, we're actually a member of a network, the Hydrogen Mobility Joint Venture, where we have already over 80 hydrogen stations up and running for transport fuel across Germany, and our plan is to exceed over 100 stations by 2021. Now, this absolutely is dependent upon that incentivization on the demand side. So you create that pull through, and it's a larger partnership then with the automakers, trucking manufacturers, the OEMs, etc. And so Germany has a unique leadership position, of course, in transport. And so this is, again, where all the pieces come together, because if you have a green fuel, but you have no vehicles, that doesn't work, because the economics around the hydrogen fueling requires actually then the demand, so that you have the utilization of that infrastructure. So this is where you have to, again, have an ecosystem approach to make and that's where government's role and the forward-looking work of governments such as of Germany and the European Union, California and the United States, for example, are so important, because that way you're creating a roadmap, as it were, for the overarching transition, because it's a systems approach that actually works.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, that's very interesting. And can you actually already see? I mean, it may be a very too difficult question to answer for you, but can you see that? I mean, Shell, of course, is a big global company. You have very big investments programs year in, year out. Do you see this already shifting as a consequence of this? Is there a reallocation of investment flows from a big player like Shell towards clean hydrogen and other clean energy technologies? Can you see that happen?
Absolutely. And so it's across the company as a whole. Like I mentioned, we're an integrated energy company. And so, for example, in our third quarter results we just announced recently, you could see with where we're doing with our overarching capital spend, even despite the constraints of the new macro with COVID, overarchingly from 2019 to 2020, we are now spending 25% of our total RDS capital in these areas of growth, including carbonization, which includes, of course, all the new energies and hydrogen that I'm investing in, which includes offshore wind, as well as hydrogen, et cetera, because again, they come together. And so previously, that was 11% of the total capital of Shell, and now it's 25% of the total capital. So we're continuing to accelerate and to lean in. And what that means is it means moving capital. It means making sure that we are actually focused on investing and as I said, as a listed company, investing for growth, looking at it in a disciplined way that fits within our financial framework, but in a way that is actually going to build the proof points of the business going forward. So we're very excited about that. As another good example, right in the middle of COVID this year, on the offshore wind side, we were successful in winning the HKN Dutch tender and the agreement with the Port of Rotterdam, where we'll be building that, again, integrated hybrid program where we have the 760 megawatt offshore wind paired with a 200 megawatt green hydrogen electrolyzer there in the Port of Rotterdam. So these are just examples that demonstrate not only the commitment of capital, and I should note that that goes to the boldness. We're talking about the boldness of government, but the boldness of a publicly listed board. So I took my HKN wind project to get RDS board approval. Now, this is over a $3+ billion capital project at the height of COVID, just after we had to baseline our dividend, which the company had not done since World War II. So in that time, our board 100% unanimously said, absolutely go. This is exactly the future of our company. This is where we're going. We see the customer demand. And so these are examples of the bravery that it takes to lean in and invest in the energy transition, which we are.
Yeah. So that's indeed a great example. Indeed,
and I have to,
as you say, even in
if I had to add one more thing, with which then, as a result of that, come fast forward back to our third quarter results, we were able to put our dividend back up by 4% because we've demonstrated resiliency, in part because of our investment in these green technologies, including solarization of our retail forecourts and adding electric vehicle charging. And so now we have stations, for example, that have no fossil fuel fueling at all, just simply electricity, and now more and more hydrogen. So these are all the things that are actually adding to the future proofing as well as the resiliency of the company.
Yes, exactly. No, that's a very good illustration indeed of how things are shifting. So from your perspective, if I hear you, it's not too exaggerated to say maybe that that clean hydrogen, of course, it will take a long time, but that it might be kind of the new oil in a way of central.
It's absolutely the new trajectory. And I just encourage, again, as I said before, that it's not a silver bullet. So I would say, to answer your question directly, the new oil is a combination. It's a hybrid of renewable power, of green hydrogen, also CCUS with blue hydrogen. It's a combination of these lower carbon and zero carbon energy solutions that really make up that full energy transition. Because again, you have different industrial needs, you need different use cases require different types of technology and different types of energy. So it's that combination, I think, that's the magic, and that's the opportunity for an integrated company such as Shell.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Brinton, for that perspective. And of course, it's now very tempting to pull in another speaker on our panel, Mr. Adamo Skrenci from Total. Thank you so much, Adamo, for stepping in at the last moment.
Yes.
For your colleague that was announced earlier. But I'm sure you will be able to step up to the plate, since you have a very long and impressive career in hydrogen. Before Total, you were also in ThyssenKrupp and in Air Liquide and in McPhy. So you know the business very well. And so we're very happy to have you with us, Adamo, today. I hope you were able to listen in also to what Elizabeth was saying on the Shell perspective, and of course we are very curious to hear from you. How is that similar in Total, or is it very different? How do you see this? How do you see the dynamics now evolving? What has changed recently that makes it suddenly so much more attractive or so much more investable? Please.
First of all, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Elizabeth and Amir, Noé. Thank you for the invitation for Total. And again, apologize for being late. I had to step over, but I don't want to waste too much of your time. And thank you for the nice introduction, Noé. When I say I started working on hydrogen and fuel cell 32 years ago, I feel a little bit old, and I don't like to say that too much, but I cannot escape from that. What has changed? It's an evolving, and there is really an acceleration recently. The acceleration is coming for me from three main drivers. The first one is renewable energy is more available and cheaper. The first driver. The second driver is a political awareness that we need to do something, and we see that from commitment from a lot of different governments that are pushing for that. But there we should discuss a little bit also the way to support that, because I have a view that says I would like to more focus on the demand than on the offer. I think the world has changed. We need to create the demand first and the offer. The third one is technological readiness. We have been working on fuel cell, PEM, electrolyzer, alkaline, etc. I think today everything is ready. Everything is ready. Sorry for that. Everything is ready. We just need to go at scale. And the technology are there. They are mature. We know that if you put electron and you produce hydrogen, it's not a new thing. If you put nitrogen, you can produce ammonia, which is another important topic linked to hydrogen. You can do that. So the technology is there. Just go at scale. The capex has been decreasing every month. You see that from a fuel cell. You see that from electrolyzer. And today, electrolyzer is I would say, becoming a commodity technology. Putting gigawatt factory is not an issue. It's not like on the battery where you need a big, complicated plant to build a big factory of gigawatt. And I've been doing that for ThyssenKrupp in Germany the last years. It's not a big deal. Honestly, it's really not a big deal if you have the demand. And by creating the demand, the cost will go down very quickly, because today the market of electrolysis in the world is, let's say, 300 million euro, peanuts. Going to 40 gigawatt it will be big. So these are the things that are changing, and making all that together, it creates a good momentum, because the business case are close to be there. We can find early business case that are there. We need just to push for CO2 value. Today, the CO2 has no real value. The market price is not there. So if we really want to do it, we have to create a market by the CO2 value. From Total perspective, I will repeat the announcement we made. Very committed to renewable, 35 gigawatt in 2025. In 2050, our CEO said, we will switch from liquid, I don't know how many liquid, maybe 80% of fossil today, to 40% electron, 40% gas, and 20% remaining liquid in 2050. A big switch. We are becoming a multi-energy company. More energy and less carbon. This is the motto of Total. You can understand that. And all the application, this is the beauty and the complexity of hydrogen. I think I just catch the last word of Elizabeth. Sorry for that. The beauty and the complexity that hydrogen can go in so many applications, so many uses, so that make it very complex. From the downstream to the upstream, from electron to storing energy, to bring energy from one place to another, to be used in mobility, to be used in energy production, in heating and power, and also in chemicals, in the real industry. When I say chemicals, can be ammonia, can be methanol, can be, and going to plastic also, because this is the first building block of all this energy. So it's a huge potential. Everybody say 2050, it's going to be 2,000 billion. We don't know. It's huge anywhere. It can be that or not. So this may create a lot of complexity with all the players that are in the game. I think hydrogen is moving from a specialty chemical, not so huge, yes, one, but to a more commodity, a more energy vector, and then different players to enter the game. You need to think large scale to make it cheap, and then to deploy the different activity. Everything that has been made during the last years is absolutely positive, because it creates awareness. I don't say you don't have to make a filling station in Los Angeles or 5 trucks, etc. It's good because it creates awareness. It shows that it's possible technologically speaking. But then I think we have to switch our mind to go in large scale. So these are a few words I can share with you, Noé.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Adamo, for sharing that with us. And indeed, you build on many, many years of experience. So you've seen this changing also. So that's great to hear and great to see what you can bring to the table there. So am I right if I interpret it also that you are very much on the same page in fact as Elizabeth in terms of you also see within Total that this is shifting and this is becoming serious investment, so that you as a big player are getting into the game, so to speak? Yeah, but
I cannot say more than that. We are both of us at the Hydrogen Council, so it means something that we are sharing. We are investing time and people and resources. Another topic is the creation of this business unit for hydrogen by hiring me recently in Total. It's also a sign for that. building the team is also another sign. So I cannot say what will be the future and what is 100% in the end of our management. These are good signs to show that we are committed to that. We also announced publicly that we want to make a first pilot project in one of our refinery. Like I would say, we are on the same page. We want to understand more. We want to learn more and see also how the business case are running. And we need also together to explain what could be the real businesses for tomorrow. And also to how can we bring that, I always repeat that, at really large scale. I think we need to move from the small demo, which were fine. It creates awareness, it creates public awareness, government awareness also, because everything that is happening today, it's the result of the last 20 years of job. When I was one of the first founding member with the bylaw of the FCHU was 20 years ago, we were only a couple of crazy guys looking at hydrogen. Today, I think all that work has been made, and we are there. But we have to be successful. We have to be careful. Yeah. We need to be successful by transforming that. Yeah. We just like a rugby game. We have to transform that, and it's not done yet. It's not done yet. We don't have to sleep and say, okay, it's done. We have the funding. No. We need to continue pushing and putting the pressure to make it happen in a correct way that create value for our industry and our countries, not just by looking for. I always say the drug, the funding drug for capex to survive for the next years. I don't like this philosophy. We have to have a vision where is going to be the market and where we want to go. Still keep that online.
That's why you stress so much the demand side also, that we need to...
Totally, the demand has to be.
That's kind of a thread that I see through the whole discussion actually from this morning already. So that's also good to keep in mind. Okay, great. I think it's time to bring in our third speaker, who is and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, Mr. Amir Sharifi. And you are leading big efforts in Ardian, which is a big private investment fund. Basically, I think you have assets 100 billion or more around the world, global also, and a lot in renewables. And you're also now, if I'm correctly informed, you're also now looking at getting into the hydrogen space. So you have, of course, a very kind of you come from a different angle, but that's why it's so interesting to hear your view. What do you see from an investor perspective? How do you look at this incredible hydrogen momentum? Is it hype, or is it also reality, or can it be a reality for an investor? From your point, how do you see this market shaping up? What are the investments that you see are needed in this area? Maybe you can enlighten us a bit from the investor perspective, please.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the introduction. It's all accurate what you mentioned. The reason why we have become extremely interested is that energy transition is a major topic for us. We've been investing in energy since the early 2000s with Ardian, and we are present across the whole value chain. We have renewable capacity, 5 gigawatt. We have mobility assets, and in the middle we have transportation and storage assets. And we can see that there is a number of synergies and opportunities, but also threats for our existing models. So we need to tackle the issue. And if you look at the figures from the investment perspective, it's quite interesting. I mean, the Hydrogen Council has announced that there could be up to $300 billion of investment by just 2030. So that's roughly $30 billion a year of investments that could be done in that space, roughly split into 3 major areas. One is the production of hydrogen to create like 300 gigawatt of capacity. There is storage, transportation, and distribution, and that could be another 80 billion. And then also producing series development and manufacturing. So all of those investments will require money, not only public money, but also private money. It will require cooperation between industrials, financial players like ourselves, and the public authorities, and we want to be part of that game. Of course, It's going to take time, and as Adamo just mentioned, there's going to be a kind of curve, probably kind of a G-curve effect, as we call it in our industry, where at the beginning you need to agree that the earlier investments are a bit more risky, and that's where probably we need to have some public support to make the case more bankable from the start, and to initiate, to ignite the process. So at our level, we have a very simple goal to phrase it into one sentence, which is to make one investment in hydrogen into the next 12 months. It's a very simple thing to say, but actually, if you really think through, considering the fact that we are investing money for pension funds and we have to take a very cautious approach to our investments, it's a much more difficult thing to achieve if you don't have the bankable business model that makes it work.
I see Elizabeth raising her hand. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. As we know, I'm sorry, I have to go at 11. So yeah. I just want to thank you so much. Thank you all, our distinguished panel members. Great conversation. Wish I could stay. Okay. All the best.
Thank you so much for your participation, and we'll be
fantastic program. Yes.
Okay, great.
To be continued. Bye. Cheers.
So that's a very interesting announcement that you made, Amir, there, that you're going to make you want to make a serious big investment. I assume in the next 12 months. I guess you know that you will be flooded now by proposals, from people listening in here, but that's maybe a good thing. But could you elaborate a little bit more, Amir? You say, yeah, we need to make this investable. You would need public support. You would need. Could you elaborate a bit more? If you were listening in, I hope also to what the State Secretary of Germany was saying. And so if you look at the policies, if you look at what governments are doing in Europe, but also elsewhere in California, in Asia, what is missing? What do you need more, in your view, to make it to make you cross that bridge?
Well, yeah, I think support mechanisms can make help the industrial and financial investors go through this time where investments have been made, but demand is not structured yet to deliver the returns. So this could take two forms. There can be push mechanisms or pull mechanisms. Push mechanisms can be regulation on gray hydrogen. They can be ban of diesel vehicles in cities, taxes on carbon emissions, all of those things, carbon border tax. But there can also be pull mechanisms like support to key actors on the value chain, such as electrolyzer producers. That's, I think, one of the angles that the French government has taken. Scale up their manufacturing capabilities. Tender offers with regulated feed-in tariffs, like we have seen in the renewable energy space. Obligation to inject low-carbon hydrogen in the gas networks. So all those mechanisms can help the hydrogen value chain to take off. And in the medium to long term, it's going to help it to become more competitive, even without these support mechanisms. And I think this is the point. I think in this should occur as early as possible, so that we are not relying on the public money, but we are relying on the sustainable fundamentals of the business to be profitable and to take scale.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Adamo, I saw you were nodding. You were nodding when Amir was mentioning that. If you think about the appropriate kind of public support mechanisms that you need, what is your view on that, and how does it compare, indeed, to what is at the moment at the table, what governments are actually doing or offering? What is missing, and what more needs to be done? You're muted, Adamo. You're still on mute. You need to click the microphone to unmute yourself. It's not working. We still cannot hear you. Meanwhile, I will go back to you then, Amir. Can you elaborate a bit more, because what I understand is you are already investing quite a bit in what, if we can call it that way, normal renewables, regular renewable power kind of projects. So what can we learn? Some people say, you know, electrolyzers, green hydrogen, and other projects in hydrogen, they are perhaps where solar and wind were 10 years ago. I mean, IEA, Fatih Birol has been saying that before. Is that what can we learn from that experience, if we translate that into what we need to do for clean hydrogen? Can you elaborate a bit?
Yes, I think what is required here, which is maybe a bit different, is that you probably need to have more players in the value chain to be cooperating together, at least in the early stages, to make the first investments happen. You need, like for the production, you need a combination of the low LCOE renewable energy capacity on one side. You need the electrolyzer, but then you also need the off-taker. And then you can also need a global infrastructure to make that flow into the system. In the case of renewables, from the start, the off-taker was quite clearly identified. Here, in this case, there can be a different number of situations for the off-take. It can be a refinery, it can be a steel maker, but it can also be a fueling station. It can take a number of different forms, and you need to organize things to make that happen. And that's where I think also we are quite interested, because if we look at our own portfolio, we have renewable production in Chile, in solar, in Nordics, in wind, in Spain, both wind and solar, in Italy, in the US. So we have those capacities in locations where the LCOE is very low. We also have access to a number of the industries, in particular the chemical industry that Adamo mentioned, but also the refineries with our existing midstream assets. We have storage capacity and networks that can transport hydrocarbons, and that can be at some point in time converted. And also we have mobility assets like airports, which have like captive fleets, and we have toll roads where you can put fueling stations over time. So I think it's this integrated thinking that needs to happen. We can obviously bring value with our portfolio, and that's when I was mentioning we can do one investment. That means that for us the starting point is to use our portfolio asset to make that investment. But obviously, I think this also where a forum like this one is very important, because I think we need to play like an open source type of approach where as many people as possible can sit around the same table and discuss how to create a joint cooperation where there is mutually more value to be created than by acting separately.
Yeah. Okay. Adamo, are you already? We can still not hear you. I don't know what is happening. You can unmute yourself. You cannot find the button. It seems.
Perhaps Adamo just go out and log in again.
Maybe the advice is, Adamo, to go out and log in again. Okay, we're facing some technical difficulties. This is maybe also a moment that I should say that we are aware that a lot of questions are coming in on the chat, but it is going to be very hard to answer all of them or to take all of them. With apologies, we will get back to try to get back to you on your questions, but we will of course if Adamo comes back, we can try to pose a couple of them to him in terms of what Total is doing. But can I first, waiting still for Adamo to come back, Amir, if I can continue a little bit with you in terms of where do you sit on this whole story, this discussion about is this a hype? Is this hydrogen story and the incredible attention that it is getting, is this a hype or is it reality? Where do you sit from an investor perspective? I guess you're not investing in hypes. You're investing only in the real stuff. So can you comment on that?
No, obviously it's we are very cautious about investing into areas which will not then materialize in the future. So we're not a venture investor, we're an infrastructure investor, and as I said, we invest pension fund money. So we need a kind of sustainable business model to work. And I think the drivers that were described before make that today a situation where it's much more relevant to consider it, because you have all the things which were hindrances to make the hydrogen value proposal real are now getting lifted. You're seeing the feedstock price going like to levels which are extremely low. You have seen that there were latest auctions for in Portugal for renewables that were coming out at 11 euros per megawatt hour. So that is like a record low type of figure in Europe, and that is a very interesting figure. If you input it into a model, you have technology is getting ripe, and the alkaline technology is a very mature one. There are other technologies coming as well on the electrolysis side. So I think ultimately it's really a matter of getting demand, as was mentioned before, and because demand will take time to take off, then it's a matter of getting some support to make the investment case workable until we can get to a scale that makes all the figures work together.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Noé?
Adamo, yes.
I changed my name. I don't know what's happened. I reconnect. Sorry. I'm not Robin Mills, not yet.
We're happy you're back.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
You wanted to say something, and then we couldn't hear you. Please. Yeah,
just wanted to say I totally share the fact that we need to collaborate still. It's early stage in this market. This market, we are just at the infancy of the market. So the collaboration is key. We don't have to look only locally. It's important, the local aspect of the development of hydrogen, but it's important to look globally and to have a common picture of what is happening around the world. Because I believe there will be like oil and gas, there will be wells for hydrogen somewhere. And we have to be prepared for that. Everybody knows about what is happening in Middle East or in Australia or in Chile. So this is important not to forget that and not to close the borders. Try to close the border and work only inside one country and also inside one region or one project. Then making big steps. It's important now to show that we move to big steps. Go for large project deployment. And I think, Amir, when you are looking for investment, it's not, I think, an investment for a small filling station to fill two small cars. Not to be negative on that. And this has been good for the past to demonstrate, but I think an investment has to be with some numbers of digits to be really an investment from your side. So we need to look at this huge project that will be structure the business for tomorrow. I have a big interest. I see a big interest in looking at ports, for example, because the port is a crazy place where everything is there. Industry, mobility, export, import, and you can decarbonate, and it's key. And this port, maybe if you do only one project in one country, if it's one port, it's already a big one. With a big vision, it's this is, for example, you can have the mobility there, you can have the the import export. There are huge important hubs in the future, and we see already some initiative in that range. Then bankable is an important word also that has been said. We need to find the bankability of this project. Again, it has to be clear: offtake, production cost, visibility on the market, on the technology, which is, as everybody said, mature. So we need to absolutely be bankable from now to start with the project. Of course, the return will not be the one dreamed for everybody, but the beginning of the project will have a return, and we need to accelerate that. That's why also funds like Ardian, but there are also other initiatives. And maybe at Total, we are starting a hydrogen fund, a clean hydrogen fund to support and to try to accelerate that. So everything that has financial to support and accelerate the deployment of the project is important. And that I think the teamwork is important. And it's nice to have this kind of meetings because we can exchange view and see where the level of maturity is in the hydrogen space. We see that the maturity getting better and better, and we see that the projects are coming.
Yeah. Okay. Again, it's a great conversation, and we could go on for hours with you, but we are already nearing the time that we have to move to our next conversation. But can I ask you both, actually, Adamo and also Amir, do you have any good advice for IPHE? How we should go forward? What should we be focusing on in terms of trying to push the global impact and the global hydrogen market? Any good advice?
If I can start, maybe, Adamo, I would say that IPHE is a very interesting platform. It's an intergovernmental partnership. It is the platform for me where countries can synchronize their actions and share best practices with regards to industrial strategy and national energy carbon reduction plans. So I think if IPHE can continue this great work to foster international cooperation, that will be very important because, as Adamo said, places like ports where there is import and export are one of the locations where there will be a view for international synergies, not only local synergies for this hydrogen theme to emerge.
Thank you. Just one word, I know IPHE since several years, and they have been doing a great job. What is for me of most important, it's a mix of technical and governmental action, which is important not to forget the technology and to show what level of maturity we achieve. The key driver for me is really international. The first name of IPHE is international, and we need to have an international view, and this is important for IPHE to keep that, bringing ideas from abroad and open the doors for development of this hydrogen. Hydrogen will be the link between all the international countries, and we need that IPHE to support and to continue the job they are doing.
Thank you so much for that good advice, and we are listening very carefully and taking notes, of course. By the way, you mentioned ports. For those of you who have not seen that yet, yesterday there was another IPHE Hydrogen Valleys discussion, actually, which you can still, it will be posted, which was all about ports. So you had what is happening in the port of Rotterdam, in the port of Los Angeles, and in Australia. So for those of you interested in that, and that was amazing indeed to see the dynamics, what is happening in the ports around the world now on hydrogen. So anyway, once again, thank you so much, Amir and Adamo, for sharing your great insights with us. It was very good. Unfortunately, Elizabeth had to leave us already a bit earlier, and sorry for the technical difficulties that you were encountering, Adamo. But we'll keep in touch. And once again, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Of course, we're happy to keep listening to the rest of the conversations. But see you anyway.
See you, and just take the opportunity to say hello to Alan from Australia. So the following guy. So I took the opportunity to say hello and have a good follow-up. Hello, Alan. Nice to see you again.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi. This is fantastic. This is a great transition. Then we go to our next conversation, and really more about centered about global trade. And it is really a great honor and pleasure for me, for us as IPHE, to have with us Dr. Alan Finkel, who is not only the chief scientist, or was the chief scientist, I have to say. I think you just handed over the baton, as they say in French, to a successor. But whilst you were chief scientist of Australia, I should say you were the big man and the father of the hydrogen strategy of Australia. That is basically it's making the rounds. It's impressing everyone and showing everyone how big this is going to possibly become, hydrogen. So, and I think you're also, Alan, you're also keeping involved because you're leading a task force, if I'm well informed, about H2 under 2, which is basically meaning how do we get the price of hydrogen under $2. So that is amazing that you keep this involvement. And you don't know it, Alan, but I'm quoting you very often because I often you probably should have made trademark about this sentence of shipping sunshine. I remember you said, we are going, as Australia, we are going to ship sunshine around the world, and wherever I use it, people love this sentence. So I do say that I didn't invent it myself. It comes from Alan Finkel. But Alan, if I can start with you. So you were preparing this hydrogen strategy. It's more than a year now since it was launched, the hydrogen strategy. Could you tell us a bit about what's your impression 1 year from 1 year later? Where are we now in terms of what's happening in Australia, and of course how are you relating to other countries as well? Can you give us a bit of an impression of what the dynamics is from your perspective, please?
Noe, can you hear me okay?
Yes, fantastic.
Excellent, fantastic. Excellent. And thank you for your kind words of introduction. I still have 28 days to go before I become a private citizen. But as you said, I am staying engaged, not across the broad spectrum of science activities in Australia, but on hydrogen and low emissions technologies. And I'm very much looking forward to further engagement with you and your colleagues. And might I congratulate you, I believe you've recently become the chair of IPHE, and that's wonderful to hear. And please use Shipping Sunshine as often as you like. Look, the hydrogen strategy in Australia has been very well received, and all Australian governments, so we're like the United States. We have a central government and 8 states, and all of the states and the Commonwealth government have made funded commitments, and industry is jumping on board as well. What is important is that we've followed up the national hydrogen strategy with what we call the low emissions technology roadmap. And that's the vision that the government has for literally replacing the incumbent high emissions technologies eventually with low emissions, price competitive newcomers. And hydrogen, of course, is one of the important members of the portfolio that we have recognised. And as you said, we've got stretch goals for each of the members of the portfolio. It's not just hydrogen, it's zero emissions steel and zero emissions aluminium and batteries to support solar and wind. But for hydrogen, the stretch goal is H2 under 2. That's $2 Australian. roughly $1.30 or $1.40 US. But H2 under 2 sounds much better than H2 under 1.30. Now, at that price, hydrogen does become competitive with petrol, as we call it, or gasoline and diesel for transport and for certain heating and power uses. The stretch goals that I just mentioned, such as H2 under 2, are not arbitrarily chosen. We've chosen priority technologies and stretch goals where we feel that the technologies can make really large-scale abatement difference, have significant economic impact, build on Australia's comparative advantages, but also be an area where government investment and government signalling to private industry can make a difference. The government's been investing money, so the Low Emission Technology Roadmap statement came out in September, and in October, through the budget, they committed just under $2 billion Australian, so $1.5 billion US, to this suite of technologies, and that included $70 million to support the creation, getting started on the creation of a regional hydrogen hub. There's also $1.6 billion of that $2 billion for our Renewable Energy Agency, which funds the intermediate level. If you think of the research pipeline as going from pure or fundamental research through translation, through demonstration, and then eventually deployment, ARENA funds the demonstration scale of the development. There's money for a package which we call Future Fuels, which is about battery electric vehicle charging stations and hydrogen refueling stations. Look, like other countries, especially in Europe, we see the COVID-19 pandemic and the recovery from that as an opportunity to come out better, and that includes investing in green technologies. That's a quick summary.
Thank you so much, Alan, for that. If I can press you a little bit more on if I would have asked you today, if I would have asked you 1 year ago, where do you think you will be in 1 year time, and you compare that to where you actually are, can you share us a little bit of a feeling? Is it going faster than you expected? Is it going slower in terms of implementation and putting the projects in place?
So I'll split my answer and answer in terms of hydrogen and separately the other suite of low emissions technologies. So hydrogen is going really quite well at the high end of my expectations, but within my expectations. We're in a foreseeable place. There's a lot of commitment to developing production capability, not enough commitment to developing demand, and that's something I hope that we explore during the conversations, but within the envelope of expected outcomes. The other work that Australia has been doing in zero emissions steel and aluminium and batteries and geosequestration and biosequestration, I did not anticipate a year ago. We have come forward in the last year in a way that I just didn't anticipate. It's been terrific to see. I'm quite excited to be part of it. It was only in February of this year that the Energy Minister, who's actually the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, it's an interesting combination. So it's more than just energy, it's emissions reduction across the economy. He announced in February this year the development of this low emissions technology roadmap and announced that I would chair the panel, the reference panel, we called it the Ministerial Reference Panel, that advised him on developing this plan. And interestingly, we worked from within. It's his plan, it's the government's plan. This was not an independent study with the recommendations thrown over the fence to the government to accept or reject. The government owns this, and that's why it was funded in October. So it was only announced in February, a huge amount of work put into it to develop this portfolio of large-scale, low-emissions technologies with stretch goals and an acceptance that it will take time. And so that's quite an exciting place for us to be, Noe.
Maybe just one follow-up question to that, Alan, and kind of a very specific question, because I remember also when we discussed earlier, and also with colleagues of yours from Australia, when we were talking about, the global trade, because this is one of our themes of this discussion also, how fast are we going to see the global trade in hydrogen take off? That when we were discussing that, I think the expectation was very much, Australia, of course, huge potential. We're going to be exporting and developing exports of clean hydrogen, but mainly to primarily Asian markets. And now, 1 year later, we see there's an MOU also between Australia and Germany. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but my impression is that it was not in the expectations 1 year ago or more than 1 year ago that Germany and exporting clean hydrogen from Australia to Europe would also already be kind of on the cards, or at least being reviewed. Is that correct, or am I wrong in this assessment?
You're basically correct. There were hints because we visited Germany when we were developing our hydrogen strategy. We visited a lot of places when we were developing the hydrogen strategy, but also we hosted a German delegation to Australia that wanted to talk about hydrogen opportunities, but there was nothing committed. You're 100% correct. We see ourselves as being geographically extremely well positioned to serve the Asian market, and we've done that extraordinarily well with coal and with liquefied natural gas. And in the long-term future, where energy exports for Australia will have to migrate to a zero-emissions energy exports, we will be entering a new global era of trading renewable energy between continents. Asia is the obvious market. But I think the Germans and others are, first of all, quite rightly hedging their bets and looking at multiple suppliers. And that's why they've entered a formal supply chain study with us. But also there's a certain degree of comfort that Germany and other countries have with Australia, because we have had a long-term record as a reliable supplier at low cost of energy and other resources. And, there is an added cost going all the way from Australia to Germany compared to Asia. But once the real cost is making the hydrogen and getting it onto the ship. The actual daily time, the extra charge of a few extra days being on the ship is not considerable. It's a small percentage. So if we can provide guaranteed, certificate proven zero emissions hydrogen reliably at a competitive price, why shouldn't Germany and other countries turn to us and start early through these exploratory mechanisms? But I do agree with your initial point. It's probably more advanced than we might have anticipated a year ago.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alan. I think this is a good point to turn to Japan, and my let me introduce my dear colleague, Mr. Toshiyuki Shirai. For people that know him, he goes by the name of Toshi, so I'm calling you Toshi here. But he's really the man at the Ministry of METI in Japan, ladies and gentlemen that are listening in, that is moving the hydrogen policy. and the man behind basically the preparation also of the Hydrogen Energy Ministerial meeting. So we're very pleased and very happy to have you with us today, Toshi. And everybody, or almost everybody, I think, knows how much Japan has shown their global leadership in clean hydrogen, and basically starting to work on clean hydrogen long before everybody else thought it was so sexy, and develop a very thorough, thought out strategy, also cabinet vision on hydrogen, with a lot of international aspects as well. So extremely important for this whole discussion on global trade. So if I can ask you, Toshi, from your perspective, because you've been now also really quite some time in the game of this, if you look back, say, a year, like I was asking Alan, could you elaborate a little bit on what you see, how much has changed in 1 year time, and for you working with around the world on hydrogen, what do you see? What do you see is moving, and where do you see this? Where do you see this going from Japan's perspective? Please, Toshi.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And I think there are a lot of changes, actually. It's more than our expectations. And if we look back the past 1 year, there are more than 10 countries which developed hydrogen policy, hydrogen strategy, action plans, or whatever it is called. But anyway, there's a great move going on national level to unlock the potential of hydrogen. And this is a good move, I think. And also, I think that the reason behind this is that there's a prevailing view that hydrogen is a critical element to decarbonize and cope with climate change. And that's a big advance and prevailing view around the world. And also, this triggered many countries which would like to export hydrogen as new resources to get a hard currency for some countries. And also, based on this prevailing view, I think one of the remarkable changes is that there are a lot of research institutions which published the long-term energy scenario that incorporates hydrogen. And for example, IEA provided Energy Technology Perspective 2020, in which they project the hydrogen taking around 13% of final energy consumption. And also, similar analysis was made by British Petroleum, in which they foresee hydrogen takes share of around 16% to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And this is a remarkable advance, and this is kind of proof that hydrogen has become the essential element to achieve decarbonization in the world. And also, this also triggers a lot of efforts by private sectors. And in fact, the number of fuel cell vehicles around the world reached over 25,000. And last year, the number of FCV produced was more than doubled compared with the year 2018. So these kinds of changes are more than our expectations. And actually, we are very much impressed by the global development in the hydrogen space. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Toshi, for that. I think you had a little bit of a microphone problem. We had heard a little bit of echo, so I don't know whether you can turn it down a little bit or something like that. At least that is what the technical staff is telling me, that it could help to turn the micro a little bit down. But I mean, you hit I think a number of critical points there in terms indeed of the international dynamics on more countries coming into the game, etc. And just to check with you, Toshi, maybe two follow-up questions. Number one, in terms of the because you launched these incredibly impressive projects with Australia, this flagship project with Australia, I think with Brunei, with Saudi Arabia. Can you give us a little bit of enlighten us a bit on, are they on track? Are they going according to plan, or do you have any do you encountering additional barriers? Number one. And number two, of course, we were also all following very closely that you had a change of prime minister in Japan. And not only that, but also that Japan, shortly after that, came out with a very important statement of commitment to net zero emissions in 2050. So I could imagine that this may have an impact also on your hydrogen plans or your hydrogen strategy revision. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Those two things, the flagship projects and the new commitment to net zero emissions.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we have two projects toward establishing international hydrogen supply chain. One is with Australia, and the other is Brunei. And I think they are both projects are on track so far. And for example, the project with Brunei, we have installed almost all necessary facilities, and actually the first shipment of hydrogen in the form of chemical substances called MCH was successfully transported to Japan. And that MCH was turned into hydrogen again in Japan, which was used for to blend in the thermal power generation in Japan. So the first demonstration project of the hydrogen supply chain was successfully completed, and now the private sector the related private sector is in talks with many players around the world to see how they can commercialize these technologies. And with regards to the project with Australia, yes, they are also on track so far. And last year in December, we successfully launched the liquefied hydrogen carrier ship with the attendance of Dr. Finkel, and thank you very much for that. And also, we expect next year to witness the first shipment of liquefied hydrogen from Australia to Japan. And also, it is very important to scale up the hydrogen supply chain, which will lead to the further lowering the cost of supply of hydrogen to Japan. So to this end, we started the technology development needed to scale up the tanks to store liquefied hydrogen, and that is also well on track. So far, the projects are on track. And regarding the second question on the statement made by our new Prime Minister Suga, yes, he announced in October that Japan will aim at achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And clearly, that gave us another boost to our hydrogen policy making. And following that statement by Prime Minister, our Economic Minister Kajiyama announced that he will compile a kind of action plan, including that for hydrogen, with a view to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. So, and this is this provided with us with a good opportunity to take a look at the current strategy to see if the current strategy is sufficient to achieve the really ambitious announcement made by our Prime Minister. And we are now working hard to review the current strategy to see if there is need to review the strategy. And of course, we are also looking at another country's strategy to kind of compare and to see if there's any room for our strategy to be further improved. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Toshi, for those explanations. And I think we can look forward probably to some, indeed, what the implications could be, and that could maybe be an acceleration or something like that. We will need to wait and see, of course, until your hard work is finished. Maybe this is also a point to draw in our third panelist, Mr. Robin Mills. Welcome to you. Robin is, for those of you who don't know him, is a CEO of Qatar Energy. He's based in the Emirates and has worked for a long time already in the Middle East. So really very well versed in what's happening there in the Middle East, and particularly in the Gulf countries. And he is not only looking at that in general, but also lately I noticed, Robin, you done some very critical and important work on hydrogen value change in the Gulf countries, and not only in the Emirates, but also more broadly. And of course, we see Saudi Aramco, we see ADNOC and others becoming active in the field. So I think again, from this perspective that we are now discussing, how is the global trade? How might this shape up in the next years to come in clean hydrogen? Could you give us an insight on what is your feeling? Not only your feeling, but also what you're hearing and the people you are talking to. What's cooking now in the Gulf countries on clean hydrogen? What has changed that people and companies are getting, governments are getting more into the game, and how fast can we expect this to develop in the next years to come? Robin, please.
Yes, thank you, Noé. It's a very interesting situation I think the Middle East is in, and in some ways it's got perhaps analogies to Australia. And Alan mentioned previously the very interesting issue of Australia has been a very successful exporter of coal and LNG to Asia, but those industries are carbon challenged in the longer term, particularly coal. And the Middle East has a somewhat similar issue, obviously, as an exporter of oil and LNG. And the Middle Eastern countries, of course, have also for many years, and particularly in recent years, had a lot of concerns about economic diversification and what is going to spur growth and what can at least supplement their hydrocarbon industries, and in the end ensure that those hydrocarbon industries continue in a climate compatible world. So this it's a pretty difficult and existential problem for the Middle East countries, given the dependence of their economies on hydrocarbon exports. And so it's not surprising, I think, that hydrogen has become very interesting. And certainly this year, we've really seen it take off dramatically in terms of interest in the region. So, there's a lot of advantages that the Middle East has as a potential exporter of hydrogen, both blue and green, right? Obviously from blue hydrogen, it's got a lot of low-cost oil and gas resources and abundant, easy to access geological storage space of CO2, and a long experience with dealing with hydrocarbons and petrochemicals and exporting them to both to Asia and to Europe. So it fits pretty naturally with existing skills. Green hydrogen, a little bit further outside the usual skill set, but on the other hand, the resource situation is very good. Obviously, extremely good solar resources, and we've seen this proved repeated in recent years. The Middle East has been in the forefront of beating solar PV cost records. Almost every few months we see a new Middle East low down at 1.3 cents a kilowatt hour, and I think in the pretty near term we'll be going below 1 cent a kilowatt hour for PV projects. Wind, not so much, but there are some good wind areas, northwest Saudi Arabia, southern Oman. There are some areas of very good wind resources as well. So put those together and you have a good combination for green hydrogen production. And, as I mentioned earlier, a very central geography, so ideal for exports either to Europe through Suez or over to South Asia and East Asia. So the conditions are very favourable. I think fair to say the Middle East is still at a very early stage in hydrogen. It's not at the stage of Australia or in terms of thinking about this as an export market, nor in the stage of Germany or Japan as thinking about it as an importer or a user of hydrogen. And also the Middle East is a diverse place. Obviously here we're really talking about the Gulf countries and three in particular who have serious hydrogen ambitions, which is Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman. The other three GCC countries have not volunteered particular ambitions in hydrogen. North Africa also, Morocco, quite a different situation, but well placed in its own way as a hydrogen exporter potentially. But if we think about those three Gulf countries that I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, I think very clearly the leader. The NEOM project up in northwest Saudi Arabia, excellent winds and solar site, very close to the Suez Canal, plenty of open land, and that's the site of this very large planned green ammonia plant, which will be used for domestic use and for export of green ammonia. That is the most advanced and competitive project. Abu Dhabi National Oil Company recent strategic plan put a lot of stress on hydrogen as well. So it'll be interesting, and that was primarily blue hydrogen, of course. But the UAE has done well in renewable energy, so we may see a green part of the strategy as well. There are some small pilot projects. And then Oman, southern Oman, the port of Duqm, a new industrial development, and again some fairly early stage projects for hydrogen, for green hydrogen, solar and wind, and in the port of Rotterdam, in some collaboration there. Also the Belgian investors from Antwerp. So there's quite a good collaboration there developing with European players in hydrogen. And I guess just to skip back on Saudi, the most recent thing, the export of blue ammonia from Saudi Aramco to Japan, only a small pilot shipment, but just testing that trade route. And I think it's pretty interesting. The question is, how will the hydrogen export from the Middle East develop? Will it be, we all talk about all the different transport methods. Will it be liquefied hydrogen? Will it be ammonia or an organic carrier? I think ammonia seems to be favoured at the moment, but we'll see. And how much is it also decarbonised products? So I think there's a lot of potential also for the Middle East to be exporting decarbonised chemicals, fertilizers, and also steel, and supplying particularly Europe in that sense with decarbonised products and trying to replace some of the hydrocarbon exports with hydrogen-derived materials. So that's another exciting area. But I think also we shouldn't exaggerate the progress that's made so far. It is early stage, and the main players I think are still concerned that where is the market for hydrogen? Who is prepared to pay a premium for this? How can a steel maker, for example, realise a premium for zero carbon steel? And that has all got to develop if we're going to see these projects, more of these projects spring up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Robin, for that quick overview, but also very, very comprehensive. So you do see, I heard you say from where you sit now, basically the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Oman are the three places where most seriously this is now considered. Not only considered, but there are also concrete projects that are being developed, like the blue ammonia, what you were talking about, which is I think part of the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia. So you do see that there's going to be serious projects going forward, depending, of course, indeed, like on what you said, the demand, whether they see the demand is there. You do expect a ramping up of serious investment projects, or not?
Yeah, I mean, NEOM is that's a green ammonia project. NEOM is a very real project. It's backed by Air Products and Aquapower. Aquapower is a big Saudi power developer with a lot of renewable capacity. So both very serious companies, and that's interesting how quickly that one's come up and how fast it's got traction. I think the conditions are just so good at NEOM that it just has an exceptional cost profile that's helped it to move forward. The Saudi Aramco and the blue ammonia thing, as I said, a trial shipment, but I think that also is indicative of the way Aramco and ADNOC will likely go in terms of blue ammonia or hydrogen, and with Japan as an initial primary market, perhaps Germany or other European countries after that. The Oman stuff is interesting, and the conditions in Oman are good, but much earlier stage, I think it would be fair to say. Also interesting, I think, to remark on Qatar. Qatar is obviously the world's biggest LNG exporter. Hydrogen would seem like a natural kind of fit or a natural development from that. But so far, Qatar has not really done anything apart from expressing a few kind of statements of vague interest. But it would be interesting to see if Qatar starts to get into hydrogen as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I remember from my days, I spent also some years working in the Middle East. And I remember at the time, the oil minister, Naimi, the then oil minister from Saudi Arabia, he once said, and I'm really now talking about a long time ago, I predict that one time, at a certain moment, Saudi Arabia will export more solar energy than oil. And to be honest, at the time, people thought, what is he talking about? And they didn't really. But now with clean hydrogen and with green hydrogen, maybe that will one day be true. Is this? How do you? I don't know whether you know this quote, but how do you see this? Is this possible? You think?
Yeah. I mean, one day is a long time, right? So yeah. when that happens is the question.
Well, 2050, say 2050.
Yeah, well, look, if the whole world is decarbonized by 2050, and if China and Europe and the US hit their zero carbon targets by 2050 or 2060, they are going to need a lot of low carbon, zero carbon imports of materials, hydrogen and other industrial materials. And at that point, well, what would the role for oil be? I mean, then oil and gas can only be used in some kind of zero carbon way, whether it's making hydrogen or plastics or whatever. So it's not an unrealistic vision. It's still a pretty long way off, I would say. And I think also we need to think, this is not, for me, it's not only a game of solar. At the moment, solar costs in the Middle East are exceptionally low and will keep going lower. But obviously solar doesn't get you the load factor on electrolyzers. Has a 20%, maybe 25% load factor at best. So for attractive economics, you need the combination of solar and wind. And that is why the NEOM site is so interesting. A lot of the rest of the Gulf, the wind resource is not particularly good. So that will need some new thinking about how to make use of the solar resource effectively there.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, again, this is an extremely interesting conversation, but we're running already out of time. I want to circle back also to our previous speakers, Alan and Toshi. So coming back to the central question, indeed on global trade. My impression is from the discussion so far. I mean, serious developments are taking place, and it might even go a little bit quicker than we expected 1 or 2 years ago. but what do you see are the critical elements for it to if we want to accelerate this development? Could you say anything about that? Basically, I'm going through all our three panelists before we wrap it up, and also the question that I gave to or that I asked the previous panelists. Do you have any good advice, all of you, for IPHE? How should we take the work forward? What should we focus on? Alan, if I can start with you.
Thanks, Noe. Look, the biggest issue, which I mentioned already before, was for demand to increase. And a lot of people think that demand will increase easily, automatically, once the prices of hydrogen come down. But I don't think so. It takes time to build a transport industry, to design the trucks, produce them, install the refueling stations, similarly for trains, similarly for shipping, or microgrids or industrial uses of hydrogen to make zero emissions fertilizer and things like that. I would urge countries who see the potential to use procurement policies and other initiatives to build the demand even prior to the price coming down to the ultimate point. People tend to think of price coming down first and then building demand, but we've seen with solar would never have gotten to the low price. Robin, you're talking about extraordinarily low prices. Solar would never have got anywhere near where it is if governments hadn't taken the initiative to bring in procurement rules and other obligations that developed the demand. So I think that's probably the single most important thing that we can do. And in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that. To your other question about advice for IPHE, there are many, many things that IPHE can do, and perhaps, Noe, we can have a conversation offline about that in your new role. But I think international trade needs a good certification scheme, and the one that we've been proposing and discussing actively through the IPHE would be based on actual measurable emissions, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions associated with the production of every kilogram of hydrogen. I think the world needs to get beyond the colorimetric definition of hydrogen. It's really a nonsense to be talking about green, blue, purple, grey or brown hydrogen. The only thing that counts is atmospheric emissions. Nothing else matters. And so a certification scheme, hopefully coordinated by the IPHE at a global level that focuses on what counts, I think will enable, let me call it, comfortable trade between nations.
Wow, thank you so much, Alan. Very clear as always, and great advice. Thank you so much. Toshi, can I go to you?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd like to echo what Dr. Anna Finke said with regards to the creating demand. And of course, it takes time, but I think we are making progress. And our current hydrogen strategy stipulates that we will procure around 300,000 tons of hydrogen by around 2030. And to this end, we would like to make our efforts to increase the demand for hydrogen. And there are two ways to increase the demand of hydrogen. One is to replace the current hydrogen produced from fossil fuels with the one produced from greener energy. For instance, there's a potential to use hydrogen in the refinery process where they need hydrogen to desulfur the products. That's one possible area. And also the other approach is to use hydrogen in the sector where hydrogen has not been yet used. For example, we are expecting to use hydrogen as fuel for power generation, and blend it in a gas turbine, for example, or blend it in a coal-fired power plants with form of ammonia. So, and if the hydrogen power generation takes off, that creates a huge demand for hydrogen, and also that provides a good benefit to the use of hydrogen in other sectors like transport sector. So we would like to establish such a good cycle of demand creation, and to this end, we would like to expand our efforts further. And with regards to the question on IPHE, I think many countries are more or less, to some degree, in the learning process anyway. So there's a lot of room for international collaboration, and IPHE can create opportunity for many countries to learn from each other. For instance, in the regulation codes and standards harmonization, which is currently being done by the working group under IPHE. And in such initiative, I think IPHE can make a difference from other international initiatives in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Toshi, for that. Robin?
Yes, look, I think what the Middle East, the Gulf countries need is to identify some early areas where there is a favorable combination of a potential supply and demand, and where there's a chance to start building an economic case for that, and working together with the partners, it could be European, Japanese, perhaps other partners to develop those projects and the supply chain for them. In some obvious areas, Toshi mentions that some part of the power sector, the shipping, I think, industry is very interesting, because that's the Gulf countries' important area of shipping, ship bunkering. So that's another interesting area. Green ammonia, well, let's say green or blue ammonia, low carbon ammonia anyway, and steel. Those are all areas, I think, which are pretty promising if you can get this a certified low carbon supply chain, and there's somebody willing to pay a premium or to guarantee offtake for a low carbon product, and get some of the first real projects going in that way.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for participating in this discussion, Alan, Toshi, and Robin. We're running a little bit over time, but we need to wrap it up now. So once again, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. It was very, very helpful and very useful. Have a nice day, rest of the day or evening. Sorry, for you, Alan. Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Noe. Good night, Toshi. Good morning, Robin. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for running a little bit over time. I hope you enjoyed this this webinar, this IPHE policy forum. It was very rich in my view. What I picked up, if I want to share, which I do, of course, want to share a couple of takeaways that I have as moderator and as chair of this session. I think we heard from Fatih Birol and also from the German State Secretary, Mr. Feicht, how important it is to have really credible policies and concrete measures, policies that also translate into concrete measures that impact the finances and the regulations that are needed to really have clean hydrogen take off. Because one other thing, second thing that was very clear, yes, it's great, so many plans, so many ambitions, but let's not forget it is still in its infancy. It needs to develop. We need to take some really big steps. We need to develop large-scale projects, and for that, we also, which was the third takeaway and a kind of, if you will, a thread that was running surprisingly through many of the discussions, how important it is to create that clear demand, that we need clear markets and demand, and the policies should be focused on how to create those demands and those markets so that the projects are really becoming investable and bankable. On the issue of global trade, it was obvious that things are moving, and despite the coronavirus, which actually we also saw in the discussion with the oil companies, despite the coronavirus, investments are going forward, which is really amazing, but it's also showing how the game is changing and how companies like Shell, Total, and others are really entering the game and becoming part of the energy transition. But on the trade side, we also see that even there things are moving faster. Some countries are entering the game, becoming potential exporters of hydrogen that were not on the map before. Also, projects are on track. For instance, between Japan, Australia, Japan, Brunei. There was a big advice coming in many of the discussions also on the importance, and something what IPHE can definitely contribute to, of developing a global certification scheme where we move away from the famous colors on hydrogen, but really go to how can we have an accepted methodology on what the carbon footprint is of the hydrogen production. So a lot of tremendously good impact and good input, I would say, for our follow-up work as IPHE, which I'm very grateful for and which we will take forward. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can probably look it back if you want to. There's going to be posted also online. And I wish you further a very good day. Thank you so much.